Welcome back. Today's lesson is a little bit complicated, so you might want to get a pencil and some notebook paper handy. Do you got it? Are you ready? Let's take a look. First, I want to talk about these two words. The first word was part of your homework vocabulary list from the last lesson, and it's probably a word that you've heard before. Even if you're not really big on anime or things like that, there is a very good possibility that you have heard the word sensei. But I really want to take a minute and talk about the differences between sensei and kyoshi. Now, most of the time, it's not a problem to think of the word sensei as meaning teacher. The problem arises for people whose job is to be a teacher. So first, let's talk about what sensei actually means. If we want to be literal, it means master, and it's a title, similar to how doctor would be in English. We have lots of doctors, not just the ones that work in the hospital. Sure, they have doctorates, and that's what makes them doctors. But we also have doctors who are teachers and doctors who work in a bunch of other fields. Sensei is exactly the same. It means master. And yes, we do give the title sensei to teachers because teachers are masters of whatever it is they're teaching. That's why they are teachers. So it's perfectly fine for students to call their teacher sensei. So when a student calls their teacher sensei, they are technically calling them master. And I think that the reason why we always translate it as teacher is because we have kind of a negative connotation with the word master, but it just means that they're a master of their trade, not what we typically think of when we think of a master. The reason why it is important to know this distinction is because if you are a teacher and someone asks you what your job is, you should not tell them that you are a sensei. Instead, you should use the actual word for teacher. The noun teacher is kyoshi, not sensei. Now, yes, if you are a teacher, you are a sensei, and your students will call you sensei. But you should never refer to yourself that way. For the same reason why you shouldn't put an honorific on your own name. It just sounds really, really arrogant. Unfortunately, there are a few apps that do say that. They do tell you to introduce yourself as being a sensei. But you really should avoid doing that. It's much, 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 much better to say kyoshi, kyoshi. 私は教師です。私は英語の教師です。I am an English teacher. 日本語の教師です。I am a Japanese teacher. To sum it all up, sensei means master and it is a title, while kyoshi means teacher. Like it actually means teacher. So, moving on. Another one of your vocabulary words was watashi, which means I. So, I wanted to take a minute and talk about some other ways to say I. If you watch anime, you've probably heard some of these before. In fact, you've probably heard a lot more that are more common in like old Japanese or different dialects of Japanese. There's a ton of other ones depending on what region you're in, but these are pretty general and used kind of across the board. So these are the most useful ones to remember. The other ones will come with time, specific to what areas you decide to visit in Japan. Starting off with the males, we have boku, which is fairly formal and probably the most common amongst the male ways to say I. But it also has a double meaning. It can be used to refer to a young boy. So it doesn't always just mean I. Like I can use the word boku if I'm talking about a little boy. Next up we have ore, which is like a tough guy way to say I. It is used very common You'll also hear it a lot in animes. However, if you are a foreigner, even if you really are a tough guy, I don't really recommend using this because it's gonna sound like you're forcing it. Until your Japanese gets really, really good, probably just stick with the standard watashi, or if you are a man, you can use boku. But all of these other ones, they're just for your knowledge. I don't really recommend using any of them other than watashi and boku until your Japanese is really good. Just because it's gonna sound like you're trying too hard or like you're trying to fit a persona. It's just gonna give off some weird vibes. Think like the old man that's wearing like hip clothes and like the big gold chain necklaces, like bling. He's got bling on. He's trying to use like young people slang, that kind of thing. It has that kind of a vibe. Like you're just trying a little bit too hard. So I would maybe lay off of the other ones personally. However, you do need to know what they mean because you will hear them from other people. So like this is good to know. You need to know it, but maybe don't use it yourself. At least not until your Japanese is really good. Anyway, moving on. We also have washi, which is mostly used by old men. You won't really hear too many young people using that one. For the girls, we have atashi, which is like a cute way to say I. You just take the W off. If you are a foreigner and you try to use atashi, you're going to get corrected a lot. They're going to correct you and they're going to say, watashi, watashi. There are some pros and cons to being a foreigner. This applies to every single language. As a Japanese foreigner, some of the pros are that we can get away with things like pitch accent, right? We're not going to get too heavily scolded for pitch accent. Although as you get better at Japanese, you can spend more time focusing on that. I am particularly bad at pitch accent. I need to spend more time with that, I know, to improve my pronunciation, but it's not that big of a deal if you are a foreigner. It is something you should study eventually, but we can get a pass, right? Because we're foreigners. We also can get passes for certain grammar mistakes and things like that. However, some of the cons of being a foreigner is that there are some things that we can't get away with. And using things like atashi is one of them. If you try to use the word atashi, you are more than likely going to get corrected. They're going to think that you're making a mistake. They don't really necessarily make the connection that you're doing it on purpose. And instead they think that you're making a mistake. And so they will correct you. So once again, it's good to know because you're going to hear it from young girls, but maybe don't try to use it yourself. Just need to know what it is. Now, moving on to the neutral gender, we have watashi, which is the one that was in your vocabulary list. Watashi is the most common word across the board for everybody. Foreigners, natives alike, regardless of age, regardless of gender. Watashi is the one that is going to get used more often than not. We also have jibun, which has several meanings. It can also just mean me. It can mean myself. It can sometimes even mean you. Jibun is used to mean I, primarily by people who are really sporty or athletic, especially baseball. People who play baseball will often use jibun to mean I. Moving on, we have two new phrases. This time they are fairly simple sentences. They are comprised of just one word plus a verb ending. So we have the first one here, soul desu. The word soul has a bunch of meanings, but in general it means like seems, like it seems like blah blah blah. And then of course des means is, as we learned in the very first lesson. Now this makes no sense, right? Seems is seems. That doesn't make sense. But it basically means that's right, that's correct, it seems so. It can even just mean yes. A good way to remember this is by thinking of the English word so.そうです is very similar to saying that is so. そうですか? Is that so? はい、そうです。Yes, that is so. That is right. That's correct. Etc., etc., etc. The second phrase here is 違います。違います。違う means incorrect or wrong or false or different. Mas is a verb ending, which we will talk about that in a future lesson. So, chigaimasu is that's incorrect, or no, it's different, right? That's the wrong one. Things like that. These are both very useful, and you will hear these all the time. These are very commonly used phrases, so they're good to know. Okay, so we've kind of briefly touched on this, but let's do just a little review and kind of dive into it a little bit more, because we're getting ready to learn a new particle. So this is kind of important, and it's going to apply to the particle we're about to learn. The particle wa cannot come after a question word. In English, question words are things like what, how, when, who. Those are question words, right? They are the same in Japanese. Nan, what, dore, which, dare, who. All of those are question words. And they cannot come before a wa. They must always come after the wa. So I have two examples here. Kare wa dare desu ka? Who is he? Sensei wa dare desu ka? Who is the teacher? We have our noun first, our topic, the particle wa, and then we have our question word. It cannot go any other way. We must have the question word after the wa. Now, let's learn the most difficult particle and possibly the most difficult grammar in all of Japanese. Ga is difficult because in many, many ways it is very similar to wa, but they're also very different. They are a little bit similar to the words the and in English. It's often very difficult for English learners to understand how and the are different from each other. It's usually very confusing. And although there are rules and we can explain it, it can sometimes be hard to put into words. Wa and ga are similar, but not exactly the same. That's not a true one-to-one comparison. They're similar, but not quite the same. Ga is used to single out the subject of a sentence, or it can also be used to add emphasis, while wa is used to shine a spotlight on the topic. If we go back to lesson 3, you will see that I called this the subject marker. But if you look right here, I actually put the word topic. Now, why did I do that? Because technically speaking, wa is not really the subject marker, it's the topic marker. But when I first introduced it, I called it the subject marker because in all of the sentences we were looking at, it was the subject. Because in English, we don't have topics. We only have subjects. So topics are kind of a new concept. And it's difficult to understand what a topic is without looking at what a subject is. So for this lesson, because we didn't know ga yet, I introduced it as being a subject marker for simplicity's sake. Now we have ga, and ga is the true subject marker. So what exactly does this mean? A subject is something that has a grammatical relationship with the verb of the sentence. On the other hand, a topic is a non-grammatical context that applies to the whole sentence. The reason why this is confusing and the reason why I introduced wa as being a subject marker is because sometimes the topic and the subject are the same thing. So let's do a little comparison of the particles wa and ga. So wa is used for descriptions and facts. If I want to talk about the color of something or the height of something or things like that, I'm going to use wa. On the other hand, ga is used for statements about something. The next one is important. Wa can be used to contrast something, right? You are this thing as opposed to all other things. Ga is used to compare something, and there is some specific grammar that goes into that, which we will talk about later. But wa is contrast, ga is compare. Wa can often be removed from the sentence completely, right? It is often dropped. We will often drop the topic of the sentence. We can even replace it with a comma. That's actually a pretty good test to help you figure out if you need a wa or a ga in the sentence. If you were to remove that wa, would the sentence still make sense? If it does, you probably need a wa. If it becomes confusing, then you probably need ga. As I mentioned a minute ago, wa cannot follow question words, but ga can. If the question word is the subject of the sentence, we can use ga instead. I can say, dore ga neko desu ka? I can say that. I cannot say dore wa. I can only say dore ga. Which one is a cat? Dore ga neko desu ka? Ga usually comes after wa. So if we already have a wa in the sentence and you feel like you kind of need another wa, you're going to use ga. You're not going to use wa twice in the same sentence. This point here at the bottom, this point is the best way to remember the differences between wa and ga. If you take whatever is before the wa and you say, as for this thing, that's pretty much what wa does. So, in a sentence like, kore wa neko desu, this is both the subject and the topic. But we can think of it as being as for this thing, it is a cat. Watashi wa kyoushi desu. As for me, I am a teacher. So that's kind of what wa does. On the other hand, ga causes the verb to have a direct relationship with the subject. And I know that these bullet points sound a little bit confusing, especially if you're brand new to this. But once you look at some example sentences, it'll kind of start making sense. The reason why it's important to know how wa and ga are different is because sometimes we can alter the meaning of a sentence just by changing the particle. So first we have kao wa kirei desu ne. This means, as for your face, it is beautiful. That sounds great, right? But remember that wa is used to contrast. If you say this to a girl, what you're saying is her face is beautiful, but in contrast to her other features. She's a butterface, right? She's got a beautiful face, but the rest of her is mediocre or maybe even bad, right? This is, you might accidentally offend someone that you're trying to compliment. On the other hand, kao ga kirei desu ne. This one has a hidden topic, right? Kanojo wa kao ga kirei desu ne, right? As for her, her face is beautiful. Because the word ga adds a direct grammatical relationship between the subject and the verb, all this is doing is saying that her face is beautiful. It's just a statement. There's no extra strings attached. You're not comparing it to anything. You're not saying her other features aren't good. It's just a statement. As for her, her face is beautiful. If you're going to say this to someone, the second one is the preferred way to do it. Does that make sense? Are you following along? It is confusing. It takes practice. And even Japanese people have trouble explaining why they're different. If you ever want to confuse a Japanese person, ask them to explain the difference between wa and ga. Even if they are a language teacher, there is a good chance that they're going to have trouble explaining this. There are tons of other resources that you can look at different theories, different perspectives. There are whole books written about the differences between wa and ga. It is that complicated. So if you are confused, it's okay because everybody else is confused too. Okay, so let's look at two sentences that are both very similar, but one uses wa and one uses ga. So the first one we have Tanaka-san wa dare desu ka? As for Tanaka, who is he? If we wanted to use ga instead, we actually have to change the word order because remember, we cannot have a wa after a question word. So to use ga instead, we would have to change it to dare ga? Tanaka-san desu ka? This one is more literally who is Tanaka. Who being the subject, who is Tanaka? Who is he? So the first one, as for Tanaka, who is he? The second one, who is Tanaka? They're very, very similar, but there is a slight nuance. Same with English, ever so slightly different. They have pretty much the same meaning, but they're just ever so slightly different. For the second sentence, we have Tanaka-san wa sensei desu. As for Tanaka, he is a teacher, right? If we are talking about somebody else, we can say that they're a teacher by using sensei. If we're talking about ourselves, we don't call ourselves sensei, right? Just a reminder. So we can say Tanaka-san is a teacher. As for Tanaka, he is a teacher. He is a sensei, a master. This sentence using wa is just a fact, right? It's just a description of Tanaka. It's a fact. Ga can be used for emphasis or statements. So, Tanaka-san ga sensei desu. This can do one of two things. Number one, it could be adding emphasis. We could be putting emphasis on the fact that Tanaka, he is the one that is a teacher, right? This could be for emphasis. However, it can also be the answer to a question. It could be the answer to dare ga Tanaka-san desu ka? Who is Tanaka? Oh, Tanaka is the teacher, right? So this one could be the answer to a question, or it could be for emphasis. It's a little bit different than using wa, which is just a normal statement or description of Tanaka. Hang in there, guys. We are almost done. Let's quickly go over the S consonants. We have in order sa, shi, su, se, so. Notice that here, I did not say si. I said she. She. Let's take a look. Sa. She. Su. Se. And so. Sa, we have a saute. He is sauteing some rice, it looks like, with some vegetables. We're doing a saute. Sa. Then here, this one's pretty self-explanatory. We have sushi, sushi. This one I don't like that much. Here we have Superman, but without the colorful picture, it can be kind of hard to picture this as being Superman. The way that I remembered it was a pregnant woman. It's a pregnant woman, and you can see her giant baby bump here. Let me just draw it. So we have a pregnant woman here. She's very pregnant. She has a big baby bump, right? Here she is, and she's so happy. And she's due soon. Soon. Her baby is due soon. That is how I remembered it, but I could not find a picture to illustrate that. For set, we have a child here that is being set on a parent's lap, right? You're setting the child down on your lap, se. And this one is so for soul, right? We have a soul who's leaving the grave. So you can also think of a thread from a sewing needle. So let's practice writing them as always. Sa is exactly like ki, except it only has one arm. So you're going to draw your arm first. And also like ki, it is optional to break it, right? You can break it and draw this separate, but you don't have to. You can also draw it like this. And this is how I draw it because I have a hard time, for whatever reason. I think it looks funky when it's broken, but either one is correct. So it's totally fine. She is super easy. It's just like a fish hook for your sushi. Just to show you one more time. There you go, fish hook. Easy peasy for that one. Su is also really easy, but for whatever reason, I think it's really ugly. It looks totally fine and cute even when it is written in a text. However, whenever it's written by hand, I just think maybe it's my handwriting. Maybe my handwriting is ugly. What do you guys think? Do I have ugly handwriting? Is that what the problem is? It's me? I'm the problem? Probably. That's probably the best explanation. I'm the problem. Either way, you just draw your arms, make a squiggle, and you have su, su. Moving on to se. Now this one is a little tricky because of the stroke order. You are going to be tempted to do 3, either first or second. Now that you have some practice writing characters, you might be used to doing the horizontal first. However, if you are not tempted to do number 3 first, you will be tempted to do it second. But you should not. Once again, stroke order is important. Do the little one first. And then come back and do number 3. So one more time, draw your arms. Do your baby first, and then you can do your parent. Do the parent second, after the child. Child goes first. Think child first. Baby goes first. Baby's always number 1. Always put the baby first. That will help you to remember. Last one is so, which is a little complicated, but after you get used to it, it's kind of fun to write it because it's like a little squiggly. So it looks a little bit like a Z. At first, you kind of make a Z, and without disconnecting, don't disconnect, you're going to make a letter C at the end. So, joop, joop, joop. After you get used to it, it's really fun. So practice this one. It's just, again, letter Z and then a C at the end. Letter Z, add a C. That's going to give you so for soul, or maybe a sewing needle, right? You just got done embroidering something and you made so. Now, because this is a consonant, it also has the ability to have a dakten. If you don't remember, a dakten is a symbol that is added to the upper right corner to change the pronunciation. So all of the S's except for she get turned into a Z. Za, ji, zu, ze, zo. Right? All of them are Z's except for G. And this G is used very often. You're going to see this all the time in many words. So this one is important to remember. It is G, not Z. And we have some more words that you can read with all of the kana that you know. So pause the video for a second. Look at these pictures and look at these kana characters and try to read them all by yourself. You can do it. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. You can read these words. What do you think they say? Pause the video. Are you ready? Let's go over them piece by piece. The first one should be obvious based off of the picture. It's sushi, right? Sushi, sushi. Easy peasy. Second, we have shika, which is deer. The next one is a little bit harder, not only because the picture doesn't exactly convey the meaning, but also because it has 4 characters. It is suzushi. Suzushi. Notice the dakten in the second character. This means cool. So a fan cools you off. It blows cool air, right? Then we have ase, which means sweat. Sweat. Then we have osoi. O-so-i. Osoi. This one means slow. A slow turtle. A slow grandpa turtle. Last one is sekai. 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 This one means world. And finally, we have some more homework. You might notice that the romaji section is really long and kind of difficult to read. I will eventually completely get rid of the romaji column and only have the kana, the kanji, and the English. I thought about doing it progressive the way that it is in the book, but decided to help you guys out a little bit and actually include the whole romaji. However, once all of the hiragana has been introduced, I will be removing this column. And I will keep it removed even as we learn katakana. I'm not going to include the romaji anymore once all of the hiragana has been introduced. So anyway, as always, take a picture, study your vocabulary words. We will be learning some more grammar next time, but it will be another short lesson. The grammar in that is pretty easy, and we are going to use some of these words. So with that, we are all done. It is time to say goodbye, farewell, sayonara. I will see you next time. Bye.